Song for a Whale, Chapter 34. That was it. The day when everything I'd planned, all the work I'd done would come together. It would be worth it because of what would happen in just a couple of hours. Benny joined Grandma and me for breakfast. After loading up my plate at the buffet, all I could do was stare out the window, too excited to eat. It didn't feel like the boat was moving anymore. We were there. Ready? Grandma signed. I nodded but stayed in my seat, clutching my backpack. The whole reason for the trip was right ahead of me. Of course, I'd have to leave the ship to get any closer to the sanctuary, but I couldn't make myself stand up. Until then, I hadn't failed. Soon, that could change. Even if I did get to see the expedition, it might not work out. Maybe Blue 55 would swim away like he had before, or avoid the boat altogether. He had no way of knowing what this meant to me. What might come and go without a glance, or not show up at all. So many ways to fail, all right in front of me, but I had to try. First, I checked to see how close 55 was to the sanctuary. I'd been avoiding the tracker app since there was nothing I could do about where Blue 55 was. But now, it was worth finding out if we had to hurry off the ship right then or take our time. That was if he was singing at all. Instead of the dotted line that had been on the screen the last time I'd looked, a solid black line traced 55's path. When I saw the blinking blue dot that showed where he was, I closed the tracker app and set my phone face down on the table. That solid line I'd been so desperate to see had finally appeared. I just didn't expect to see it so far away. I picked up the phone again, even though I didn't want to look. If I left it on the table, it didn't have to be true yet. Maybe the program just needed to refresh. But no. When I reopened it, there was the current time and date. Blue 55 was singing again, but far away. One of the detours he sometimes took for no reasons no one knew. I tried to push away the thought that crept into my mind. I wasn't going to meet Blue 55. Grandma and Benny looked at me with questions on their faces, waiting for me to explain what was wrong. All I could do was hold the phone out for them to see. Washington? Grandma signed. The sanctuary had to know the news. What were they going to do? I opened up their website and found a new post. Operation Tag 55. Headed south. Well, folks, nature's unpredictable. We're relieved to find out that Blue 55 is alive and singing. But the bad news is he's nowhere near Appleton as usual. For some reason, he's changed course and is swimming off the Washington coast, headed toward Oregon. We will still go forward with the tagging, but it won't happen here. A couple of us will be flying to the Marine Mammal Sanctuary in Lighthouse Bay, Oregon, where we expect Blue 55 will be in a few days. We'll work with the staff there to go out and tag 55 with a tracker. No mention of the song that I'd made for him. When I opened my email to send Andy a message to ask about it, I found that she'd already written to me. Dear Iris, well, we have good news and bad news, which you know if you're keeping up with Blue 55. Here's a link to our latest post in case you haven't seen it, and to Lighthouse Bay's Sanctuary. It's a great place, one that I think would be good for 55 to hang out in for a while if he wants to, but we'll see what he does. Since they're in warmer waters, they take care of whales and dolphins year-round. It'll be interesting to see if Blue 55 interacts at all with the animals there. He'd have a captive audience, you could say. I did pass along your song to them, and I'm sorry to say they don't want to play it. We'll have the hydrophone and speaker aboard the boat so we can listen for the whale, but the team wants to just get out there, tag him, and get back to the sanctuary without adding anything else to the plan. They're worried that playing the song over the boat's speaker would make it harder to hear Blue 55. I mentioned playing your song afterward, but they didn't think it was important since the goal is to tag him with the tracker. I disagree with them, and I think it'd be interesting to find out if he responds to the recording. But since we'll be at their sanctuary now, it's really their call. Sorry I don't have better news for you. We'll still broadcast the expedition online, so you'll be able to watch when and if we meet Blue 55. And whenever he does come to Appleton again, we'll play your song for him. Andy. I wanted to throw my phone at the wall and watch Andy's dumb message shatter into thousands of pieces. Instead, I pounded the table and shoved my chair back. I couldn't stand to think about what this meant. I handed my phone to Benny so she and Grandma could read the update. Before he changed course, Blue 55 had finally been swimming toward a friend. It felt like we were in this together, both heading toward the place where we'd find each other, but it was just me all along. Benny showed me the screen of her own phone where she typed, "Now what?" I shrugged. There was nothing to do. This didn't make sense. Nothing in the world was singing back to this whale except for one deaf girl. I'd check the sanctuary Andy mentioned, at least to see where Blue 55 would be. Maybe I'd watch the tagging expedition online after all, which I could have done if I'd stayed home with my family in Wendell and a bowl of popcorn. And Grandma handed my phone back to me. I clicked on the Lighthouse Bay link from the message. The screen filled with a picture of the blue bay next to a tall white house topped with a red roof. A page labeled "The Residence" showed a picture of each animal at the sanctuary, along with a brief description. Some of them were free to come and go as long as they were healthy. Part of the sanctuary was like a hospital for injured and sick animals, and they lived in either indoor pools or in sea pens until they were rehabilitated and ready to return to the open ocean. The bay was made from an underwater canyon almost as big as the Grand Canyon, so even the water near the docks and the shore was miles deep instead of sloping from shallow to deep water like the beaches I was used to. Some of the animals were retired performers from places like SeaWorld. They were too old or sick to continue doing their shows, but they didn't know how to hunt for their food in the wild. They lived in large sea pens, so they had plenty of room to swim around, but still had people to toss fish to them. Without being asked, two of the dolphins there still perform their old show routine 3 times a day, right on schedule. A beluga whale, whose tail had been injured by propeller, lived in another outdoor pen. There's also albino animals such as a pink dolphin and a seal. Their color made them too obvious to hunt or avoid predators, and they'd been abandoned by their families. It reminded me of the TV movie about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer that played every year at Christmas time. Here was the island of misfit toys for ocean and mammals. Blue 55 wasn't injured or sick like any of these other animals, but maybe he'd feel at home and stick around for a while if he heard a familiar song. I didn't understand what was so hard about playing the song after the tagging. The news page on the site had an announcement: the return of Mara, about a young whale they'd helped rescue 2 years earlier. She was found stranded on a nearby beach, and the staff from Lighthouse Bay Sanctuary was able to return her to the ocean. They weren't sure she'd survive long after that, though. She was barely old enough to make it without her mother, who wasn't anywhere around. They named her Mara and tagged her so they could track how she was doing. She surprised everyone by making it on her own. Each summer since then, the sanctuary staff celebrated when Mara returned to Lighthouse Bay, where the people who'd rescued her could watch her swim. She was there at the bay right then and was a blue whale like 55's mother. I wondered if Blue 55 and Mara would be able to communicate a little if they spent enough time together. She hadn't interacted with other whales much, no telling how much language she had or didn't have. Maybe they could be like Benny and me and become friends, even though they spoke different languages. Yes, Lighthouse Bay would be the perfect place for Blue 55, and here I was, more than 1,000 miles away, and I couldn't believe it. If only I'd known earlier that this might happen, I could have flown to whatever airport was closest to the Oregon sanctuary and made my way from there. Instead, I walked right onto the ship that was going to be that was going to keep me from meeting Blue 55. My plan was crumbling like the wire insulation in the radio that I'd worked on at home. All the parts were in place, but nothing to connect them. I traced the etched whale on the compass with my finger as I thought about what to do. No point in leaving the ship any longer. My whole reason for being there was swimming away. We'll think of something, Grandma told me. Benny nodded in agreement. I wanted to believe them, even though it was hopeless. All the new problems were wrapped up in my head and tangled ball that I couldn't unravel. If only Blue 55 had been singing lately, we'd have known where he was and in what direction he was headed. Instead of getting hit with this news on the day I'm supposed to meet him, maybe it was a last minute decision and he didn't feel like telling anyone, like Grandma when she took off for the beach that day. Benny tapped me and signed. Paper. I forgot mine. I handed her my notepad. She sat in the middle of the table between her and Grandma. Phone, too, Grandma signed. Show me that sanctuary. Grandma scrolled through the Lighthouse Bay site, then opened a map on the phone and scribbled some dates on the notepad. If we rent a car and drive to the sanctuary after getting off the ship in San Francisco, we'll miss him. Grandma scrolled up the map. Let's see how far it is from Cape Oliver. Before ending the cruise in San Francisco, the ship would stop at one port in Oregon. Benny brought up a map on her phone and found the distance to the sanctuary from the last stop, Cape Oliver. Grandma jotted down more dates and a schedule. We'll have a chance if we drive from Cape Oliver. Maybe we'll even be early. If that's the case, we'll stick around until he gets there. What if we can't get back here on time? Even if the ship stayed in port all day, we probably wouldn't make it back after driving all that way, meeting Blue 55, then driving back to the ship. I didn't know how we'd get all our things from the cabin and back to San Francisco to fly home if we really did miss the boat. Plus, Grandma was enjoying the cruise. I didn't want her to miss out on the rest because of me. Grandma shrugged. We'll figure it out. Meeting the whale is the important thing, right? Maybe I wouldn't even get to meet the whale after all, but there wasn't a better plan. Then I thought of a way I could get to Lighthouse Bay on my own. There was no reason for Grandma to miss any of the cruise. I spelled out BUS and pointed to Cape Oliver on the map. Then I wrote, I could go by myself and Grandma can stay here. Grandma leaned over to read my note. That's too far. I don't want you going all that way yourself. I tapped the thumb of a five hand shape on my chest to argue back. I'll be fine. Before Grandma could answer back, Benny touched my arm and signed, Kid, and pointed at me. I shrugged, wondering what she was getting at. The ship won't leave a kid behind alone, she wrote on the notepad. They'd have to wait for you. You can't leave the ship without your grandma anyway. So that wouldn't work. I really wanted Grandma to stay on board. She was happy here. She found fun things to do, and she was really trying to come up with a way to meet Blue 55. Maybe meeting him would make her happy too. Okay, I wrote, we'll drive, but we might not be back before the ship leaves. Benny read my note, then flipped to a new page. She smiled and wrote something down, then set the notepad on the table for us to see. The train is faster